Viewers, welcome back. My prayer for you is that He who began a new work in you will bring it to completion. The topic for today is history, amnesia, and the delusion of grandeur. How nations, kingdoms, and empires rise and why they fall. It is often tempting for nations, kingdoms, and empires to think or even believe that they are in charge, that they can do and undo, or that they are invincible. This was despite their humble beginnings. Believe it or not, most nations and kingdoms began as individuals or families. Sadly, as soon as they became great, many of them lost it, and they eventually became history. One historical king who made this mistake was King Nebuchadnezzar, and he regretted it. This ancient king of Babylon, whose story is found in the biblical book of Daniel, had a lot to do with what happened in the world. In chapter 4 of the book of Daniel, verses 28 to 35, read as follows. All these came upon the king Nebuchadnezzar at the end of 12 months. He walked in the palace of the kingdom of Babylon. The king spake and said, Is not this great Babylon that I have built for the house of the kingdom by the might of my power and for the honor of my majesty? While the word was in the king's mouth, there fell a voice from heaven, saying, O King Nebuchadnezzar, to thee it is spoken. The kingdom is departed from thee, and they shall drive thee from men, and thy dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. They shall make thee to eat grass as oxen, and 7 times shall pass over thee, until thou know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will. The same hour was the thing fulfilled upon Nebuchadnezzar, and he was driven from men, and did eat grass as oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till his hairs were grown like eagle's feathers, and his nails like birds' claws. And at the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up mine eyes unto heaven, and mine understanding returned unto me, and I blessed the Most High, and I praised and honored him that liveth forever, and whose dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom is from generation to generation, and all the inhabitants of the earth are reputed as nothing, and he doeth according to his will in the army of heaven. And among the inhabitants of the earth, and none can stay his hand, or say unto him, What doest thou? However, the son of this same Nebuchadnezzar, that is, King Belshazza, was not as fortunate as his father, who later came to his senses by acknowledging the supremacy of God. This is the story of King Belshazza. In the same book of Daniel, chapter 5, starting from verse 1, the passage reads, Belshazza, the king, made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords, and drank wine before the 1,000. Belshazza, whilst he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple which was in Jerusalem, that the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines might drink therein. Then they brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of God, which was at Jerusalem. And the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines drank in them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and of silver, of brass, of iron, of wood, and of stone. In the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hands, and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. Then the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosed, and his knees smote one against another. The king cried aloud to bring in the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. And the king spake and said to the wise men of Babylon, Whosoever shall read this writing and show me the interpretation thereof shall be clothed with scarlet and have a chain of gold about his neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Then came in all the king's wise men, but they could not read the writing, nor make known to the king the interpretation thereof. Then was King Belshazza greatly troubled, and his countenance was changed in him, and his lords were astonished. Now the queen, by reason of the words of the king and his lords, came into the banquet house, and the queen spake and said, O king, live forever. Let not thy thoughts trouble thee, nor let thy countenance be changed. There is a man in thy kingdom, in whom is the spirit of the holy gods, and in the days of thy father light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, was found in him, whom the king Nebuchadnezzar, thy father, the king, I say, thy father, made master of the magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and soothsayers. For as much as an excellent spirit and knowledge and understanding, interpreting of dreams and showing of hard sentences and dissolving of doubts were found in the same Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and he will show thee the interpretation. Then was Daniel brought in before the king, and the king spake and said unto Daniel, Art thou that Daniel, which art of the children of the captivity of Judah, whom the king my father brought out of Jewry? I have even heard of thee that the spirit of the gods is in thee, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom is found in thee. And now the wise men, the astrologers, have been brought in before me, that they should read this writing and make known unto me the interpretation thereof. But they could not show the interpretation of the thing. And I've heard of thee that thou canst make interpretations and dissolve doubts. Now, if thou canst read the writing and make known to me the interpretation thereof, thou shalt be clothed with scarlet and have a chain of gold about thy neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Then Daniel answered and said before the king, Let thy gifts be to thyself, and give thy rewards to another. Yet I will read the writing unto the king, and make known to him the interpretation. O thou king, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar, thy father, a kingdom, and majesty, and glory, and honor. And for the majesty that he gave him, all people, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. Whom he would, he slew, and whom he would, is kept alive, and whom he would, is set up, and whom he would, he put down. But when his heart was lifted up, and his mind hardened in pride, he was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. And he was driven from the sons of men, and his heart was made like the beasts, and his dwelling was with the wild asses. They fed him with grass like oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till he knew that the Most High God ruled in the kingdom of men, and that he appointed over it whosoever he will. And thou his son, O Belshazza, hast not humbled thine heart, though thou knewest all this, but hast lifted up thyself against the Lord of heaven, and they have brought the vessels of his house before thee, and thou and thy lords, thy wives, and thy concubines have drunk wine in them, and thou hast praised the gods of silver and gold, of brass, iron, wood, and stone, which see not, nor hear, nor know, and the God in whose hand thy breath is, and whose are all thy ways, hast thou not glorified. Then was the part of the hand sent from him, and this writing was written. And this is the writing that was written: Mene, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. This is the interpretation of the thing. Mene, God hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it. Tekel, thou art weighed in the balances and art found wanting. Peres, thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Then commanded Belshazza, and they clothed Daniel with scarlet, and put a chain of gold about his neck, and made a proclamation concerning him, that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. In that night was Belshazza, the king of the Chaldeans, slain. King Belshazza lost his life and his kingdom as a result of his pride and hubris. The stories of these two kings, Nebuchadnezzar and his son Belshazza, were typical of great leaders and kings who failed to acknowledge that God is the greatest. They thought they could say and do anything they wanted. There was also the case of Sodom and Gomorrah. According to scriptures, these were cities that were incinerated for their practice of homosexuality. The people of these cities must have thought or believed that they were enjoying their fundamental human rights by their practice of homosexuality. However, God had other ideas. The Bible puts it this way in Genesis 19, verses 24 and 25. I read, "Then the Lord rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven, and he overthrew those cities and all the plain and all the inhabitants of the cities, and that which grew upon the ground." The only conclusions that one can come to in the light of all the above are that God is not only the only one in charge of history, past and present and future, but that he raises cities, nations, kingdoms, and empires. He also brings down cities, nations, kingdoms, and empires. The Bible says that it is God who rules in the affairs of men. The Almighty has always been and will always be the one who has the final say in the affairs of humans. Despite all these things, some nations, individuals, and kingdoms appear to still believe they can play God whenever it comes to the affairs of nations. This brings us to what the United States of America has been doing. This once great nation has been busy propagating a new gospel. And this is the gospel according to Satan. Gas. The U.S. has been busy exporting homosexuality to other nations of the world. The Americans have been putting so much pressure on African countries. For instance, this has led to some countries, for example, Uganda, passing anti-homosexual legislations in their parliaments. Amazingly, many of these African countries are indebted to international financial institutions. Rather than help them to pay off their debts, America has decided that it is more important to try to turn Africans into homosexuals. Americans are trying to force feed Africans with their evil doctrines. It is hardly surprising, however, that a nation that allowed the devil to take away the Bible from our schools will be actively working to promote a lifestyle that is an abomination to God. Please, if you have not subscribed to this channel, kindly do so and turn on the notification button. God bless you. I will see you in the next video.